I am bad at every sport. So you don't need to go to the most prestigious school.
Do you go to supermarkets or you do the bargaining in bazaars?
Hands together, namaste from, a respectful distance. The ones who try the hardest. You don't have to be the most academic. You know what I wanted to be before a teacher? An Air Force pilot.
How would you compare the infrastructure of the schools that you've worked so far? And which one is like the best in your opinion?
Which is why someone like me who hates the heat could spend 5 years in Dominican Republic, where you only stop sweating for about 3 weeks in January, and then the rest of it's hot. In terms of just the insane beauty of it, I don't think anything compares to Samarkand.
Hello everyone, welcome to the fifth episode of AIM Talks podcast, and I'm your host Abdullah. Today I'm joined by a special guest, Ms Abbey, who's been working as an international chemistry teacher in Uzbekistan for past years, and she was awarded prestigious medal Dostlik Ordeni for her dedication and commitment to the education of Uzbekistan. Welcome, Ms Abbey, and we are glad to host you.
Thank you for having me.
Uh-huh. So let's start with an introduction. Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and share a little about your family and upbringing?
Okay, my name is Abbey Marsden. I'm from a fairly small city called Sarnia in Canada, and my parents still live there, still live in the house that I grew up in. So that's where I go on most of my summer holidays. And I came up through public schools in Canada and went to public universities in Canada. I studied French and chemistry at the undergraduate level, which people think is an odd combination, but I enjoyed it. And then after that, I studied education, and since then, I've been traveling around the world teaching.
Uh-huh. Great. So you have a very diverse experience. So you said you studied at a public school. What was the name of it? And did you study only at one high school or you changed the high schools?
So my public high school was called Northern Collegiate. It's there in Sarnia, and because I never moved in my life, I stayed at the same high school for us. High school was at that time, and I think still is at that high school, 4 years. So I went to a school called King George VI from kindergarten to grade 8, and then high school after that.
Uh-huh, what was the hardest thing for you as a student back in your days?
I am bad at every sport.
Uh,
So, gym class is supposed to be fun and for participating and getting exercise and being in shape. But twice in my high school career, I ended up mopping my own blood off the gym floor
wow.
because my nose is a magnet for basketballs.
Mm. Mhm. Who was your favorite teacher when you were at school?
My chemistry teachers, of course. So Mr. Stover was the fun chemistry teacher who did these crazy experiments, and we had a lot of fun in his class. But then I also have to give a shout out to Mrs. K, who I did not like very much at the time because she was very strict, but I was so prepared for university level chemistry. So yeah, they were kind of
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
they were what steered me in the direction of chemistry.
So you loved chemistry from your high school?
Yes, yeah.
Uh-huh. Can you talk a little bit about the education in Canada? I guess our listeners don't know a lot about the Canadian education, like how many years is the high school and is it compulsory like in Uzbekistan to go to the kindergarten before the high school and maybe a little bit about the tertiary education as well?
Okay, well, first of all, education in Canada is not education in Canada. It's by province. So it's different across the 10 provinces and 3 territories of Canada. Where I grew up, and then even kind of from school board to school board, things can be different.
Mhm.
So when I was coming up, and I think still where my family is living, we go from kindergarten to grade 8 is all what we call primary or elementary school. And then grade 9 to grade 12 is high school. And when I was in high school, actually, there was a grade 13 as well. It was optional, and it had something called Ontario academic credits, which were like basically equivalent to a first year university course. In fact, I mentioned Mrs. K earlier. her chemistry class in OAC was more difficult than first and second year chemistry for me. I didn't see a course as hard as hers until third year chemistry in university. So, that was kind of the system that I grew up in, but it does vary across Canada.
That's interesting. And about the tertiary education, like also the high schools and the elementary school, like do you pay fees in public universities and schools, or is it like free for the citizens of Canada?
Public schools are free. I mean, they're not free, they're paid for by taxes, right? So they are, people, when they pay their property taxes, part of that goes to education, public education. And then, of course, there are certain kind of fees that come up, like your sports uniforms and things like that. But usually it's not a problem for Canadian citizens to be paying for public education. And then not very many people go to private schools because the public education system is good. And then so I said I went to a public university. Most people in Canada, or at least in the time that I was last living there, most people went to still public universities. You do pay fees, but they're subsidized by the government. So, for example, I had a lot of friends when I was in university who were international students, and they were always complaining about how high their fees were compared to ours. But that's because the Canadian government pays large subsidies for Canadian students. So it's still pretty affordable. Unfortunately, there are maybe some people who end up with student loans or end up having to maybe not go to the schools of their choice. But it's definitely not like you see in the United States, for example, where the fees are kind of out of control.
So what about the curriculum at schools? Like, do you have your own curriculum, or do you teach like A levels or maybe APs or IBs?
Public schools teach the provincial curriculum. So I lived in Ontario. That's the Ontario provincial curriculum. If you want something different, then you would have to go to a private school. But yeah, again, it's by province. So what is taught in Ontario would be a little bit different than what's taught in Quebec or British Columbia or any other province.
In general, how would you compare the difficulty of those curriculums to like what we are studying now, A levels?
When I was in school, I would kind of equate OAC on the level of difficulty with A level. But the curriculum, I think, varies also by school board and by school, because it's not, the curriculum itself is standard within Ontario, but we don't do standard exams. So there is no big final that everyone takes exactly the same final. The final is done at the school level. And so even when I was applying to universities in Ontario, they look at the school you came from and they look at your grades and they have an idea, because Ontario students tend to go to Ontario universities. They have an idea of, oh, well, if you got a 90 at this school, we know that this school is a difficult, their final exams are difficult. It kind of maybe gives you an edge up over someone else in the competition to get into a university program.
Okay, so you studied at a public college in Ontario, and like what was the name of it, and how hard was it for you to get into it? Like, are there anything beside academics that they consider? Maybe you need to write some essays, you need to give your resume or profile, any standardized tests that you took?
I didn't take any standardized tests. To get into undergraduate was not very difficult. I almost don't remember the process because it was a long time ago now. I know it's largely based on academics. We filled in an application. If you're applying to Ontario public universities, you fill in one application, and then you send it to the different universities. It gets sent on your behalf by an agency to the different universities. So I believe there were things about extracurriculars in there as well. And I may or may not have had recommendations from guidance counselors or teachers, but I don't remember. It was a long time ago. Then my second degree, which was my Bachelor of Education degree, it also depended on the school. There were some schools that more heavily weighted academics. There were others that more heavily weighted your work or volunteer experience, especially because if you're going into teaching, they like to see that you have done either teaching or tutoring, been a camp counselor, done some kind of work in the field. So that is considered, but the school kind of decides what they weight more heavily. And then, yes, there was an essay component to that as well. but I don't think we had to write essays before undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a long time ago, so I may not remember correctly, and it may have changed since then.
Yeah, okay. So you now have the Bachelor's of Education and the Bachelor's of Chemistry and French.
Yes.
So did you study like only 4 years to get them, or like separately for both?
The Bachelor of Education we do after.
Oh.
So actually, I'm just going to make a small correction. When I did undergrad, I had planned on being a teacher at that point. So I had to do 2 subjects that I could teach at a high school level.
Mhm.
And I took French and chemistry, but actually my major was French and my minor was chemistry. And then I got into teachers college, and I learned that while I love studying French, I do not love teaching French. I love teaching chemistry, so that's where my career has been.
So nowadays, a lot of young students, especially in Uzbekistan, tend to admire like top universities and put them as their ultimate goal. What do you think about it? And is the prestige of the university the most important factor?
You can be great anywhere. A couple of the best teachers that I have ever worked with went to, either very inexpensive or free universities because they came from humble backgrounds. So, and they were great teachers and great thinkers. So you don't need to go to the most prestigious school. I would say go to a school that offers a program that you're really passionate about the program. So sometimes that aligns with the prestige factor, and sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes a school is well renowned for example, in Ontario, Waterloo is the engineering university, and it's renowned for that. And so I'm not sure if that's a prestige thing or that's that that the program is going to be particularly rigorous. And I know it's rigorous because I've had some friends who went there and said they had no fun at all for 4 years. So there's another consideration. Yes, your studies are important, but do you also want something else from the kind of culture of your university?
So there needs to be some social life as well.
I would say so, yes.
So you studied like you said you studied chemistry and French at the university. That's an interesting combination, I would say. But you said like most people view it as an odd. And what drew you to those fields?
So when I started university, I wanted to be a teacher at that point. And like I said, to be a high school teacher in Ontario, we need 2 things that we can teach. My first year of university, I did physics, biology, chemistry, calculus, and French was kind of my fun course. And then I thought, if I'm going to be here for another 3 years, I may as well enjoy it a little bit. So then I specialized in French and chemistry.
So you said after like you finished your bachelor's of education, you went around the world, and since then you've been teaching. So in which countries have you worked so far in your career?
Okay, so I graduated at the same time as a lot of teachers, and in Ontario, we have a declining youth population. So when I graduated, there kind of weren't any teaching jobs around. So that's how I started on the journey around the world. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't, some people get a degree to teach English because they want to travel. I just kind of fell into it, and everything spiraled from there. I started in Mexico. While I was living in Mexico, I went just as a volunteer for 6 months to teach in Peru. After Mexico was India, then Dominican Republic, then Morocco, and now finally Uzbekistan.
So you've explored quite a lot of the countries, and Europe is left as the continent.
Yeah, it is a little more difficult to get a job in Europe than it is in the rest of the world because a lot of places prioritize European Union passport holders.
So if you were given a chance to work in Europe, would you go there?
That depends on the situation, right? I'm pretty happy where I am now. Actually, it was between Spain and Uzbekistan at the time. And Uzbekistan was the first one to make me a firm offer. So I'm here, and I guess Spain lost out because I'm pretty happy staying here.
Yeah, surely. So how has each country shaped you, the way you see the world?
Interestingly, people say to me when I travel from one country to another, oh, that must be really different. It hasn't been in my experience.
Mhm.
People are pretty much people everywhere, and kids are kids everywhere. So, I will meet students sometimes, and they will very strongly remind me of a student from another country. One individual will remind me of another one who might be, they speak a different language, they have a different religion, they're a different, culture, but there's such a commonality between people.
Mhm. Mhm.
What you do find the difference in, more than between countries, is between socioeconomic statuses.
Oh. Mhm. What about the traditions?
I mean, the traditions are obviously quite different, but the way people have kind of welcomed me into their culture everywhere I've been has been the through line.
Mhm.
So, in Mexico, when you meet the students, it was strange for me because in Canada, we never touch the students. And in Mexico, not in school, but when we'd have events and we'd have, there was a big festival or something. If I saw my students, they'd come up and kiss me on both cheeks. And it's kind of, startling for a Canadian teacher in the beginning, right? So I went from Mexico, where people greet you by kissing you on both cheeks,
Mhm.
to India, where it's, hands together, namaste from, a respectful
Mhm.
distance. But I think people see the superficial level of difference between the
Mhm.
cultures, and they don't see how I went as a foreigner, and immediately people welcomed me into their homes, into their families. Anytime people hear me talk about where I have lived, I'll talk about, oh, my best friend from Mexico, and my best friend from India, and my best friend from Morocco, and my best friend from the Dominican. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
people who have really become family to me.
Mhm. So, do you still talk with your like teachers and students from other countries?
So, none of my current students are Facebook friends of mine, but past students definitely are.
Mhm.
So I get to see my students, grow up, get married, have children. Uh, I call all of my students, current and former, my kids. So now my kids have kids. I feel like a grandma. Yeah, I do. I have a friend from Dominican I still talk to probably once a week.
Mhm.
My friend from Morocco, I just went to visit her over the summer holidays. So
Wow.
yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. And I presume you at least tried to learn the national languages of the countries you've been to. What languages can you speak now?
Can I speak easily now? Just English and Spanish these days.
Mhm.
I obviously learned French growing up. I have a degree in French even. I understand it perfectly, but I'm 20 years out of practice, so I don't speak it very easily.
Mhm.
And then when I lived in India, I spoke a little bit of Hindi. But again, it's been, what, 10 years since I left India, so
Mhm. Mhm.
I'll watch a Bollywood movie and catch most of it without the
Uh-huh.
subtitles, but
Uh-huh. Have you tried to learn Uzbek?
I have tried. It's so difficult.
Oh.
It's so English, French, and Spanish are all fairly close to each other, and even Hindi is the same language family, Indo-European. And Uzbek is a different language family.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the structure is different. The way that, ideas are put together is different. So,
Mhm.
I'm trying, but I'm not doing very well. The only thing I'm good at is the numbers for some reason.
Mhm. Mhm. What motivated you to learn those languages? Like you listed like three, four languages. That's a whole lot of number, I would say.
Well, Spanish wasn't too difficult when I got to Mexico because it's similar to French, which I
Mhm.
had learned my whole life. And when I lived in the north of Mexico, my first job, I didn't actually really need it because most people spoke English. But when I went to Mexico City, interestingly, in the capital, you find fewer people who speak English or who are willing to speak English to you
Mhm.
than in the city I lived in the north. It was like kind of an industrial city. It had a lot more kind of commerce with the United States and stuff.
Mhm.
So in the north, people spoke English to me. When I went to visit in Mexico City, people didn't really speak that much English. So if you wanted to relate to people, you had to speak what they were speaking.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the first time I went to Mexico City, I went just to visit, and a friend of a friend, who's now my best friend from Mexico, she said, "You're coming over Christmas holidays. You're going to spend Christmas by yourself?" I said, "Yeah, I'm just going to do tourism." She says, "No, come to my home." So I mean, I just meet this woman. She takes me to her home. We go to her grandma's house for Christmas dinner, and they all spoke Spanish. And so, if I wanted to be part of that family, and I very much did want to be part of that family, I had to learn.
Mhm. Mhm. Now moving on to different questions. Who is your favorite sort of student?
The ones who try the hardest. You don't have to be the most academic. Actually, let me qualify that in two ways: the ones who work the hardest, and then the ones who find the most joy in it, who are often the same students, but not always. Just yesterday, or 2 days ago, I guess, I was showing something in the lab, and the face of the student just looking at it, like the same face I get when I look at the same experiment that I've done, since I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
And so the wonder is definitely something for a science teacher to love. And then even if something is difficult for you, the ones who just work at it and work at it, I got nothing but time for those kids. I will always spend time with those kids because it's your education. You should want it that badly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you consider when choosing a place to work in?
The school. So people sometimes think it's kind of a strange combination of countries that I've been to, or, ask me why do I pick this country or that. It's always the school. So the reason I came to the presidential school is, the setup is perfect for really good education. We have the small class sizes. You can give kids individual attention. The lab supplies are way more than adequate. There's some things I've never had access to before because they were too expensive for other places. It's really been set up in a way that gives us every opportunity to offer high quality education. So, and the place I was in, the Dominican, was a similar idea where people have to apply to get in. You have to want it. It's people are really there to learn, so it gets rid of some of the kind of housekeeping stuff you have to do at other schools.
Out of all the languages you know, which one is the most fun for you to speak, and which one was the hardest to learn?
The most fun, Spanish. The hardest to learn, Hindi. But like Spanish, just in general, I love the language. But Hindi, I had a couple of really fun experiences with because nobody expects the white girl in India to speak Hindi. So that was kind of fun in that sense. But as a language goes, I love Spanish.
Has knowing multiple languages ever helped you in a surprising or funny situation?
It helps you just relate to people in general, but just the fun, the joyful aspect of it. I have two stories from India. One, I was on a night bus, and there are seats on the bus, but there are also, like, you can pay a little more and have the lay down section that's up above. And it's got like a little curtain so no one can see you. So I got on the first stop, and I'm sleeping in my little chamber and no one can see me. And then in the morning, we seem to be taking a very long time to get to our destination. And I thought, I hope we haven't passed it. I hope I didn't miss a stop and I didn't. So I, move my curtain and poke my head out and ask the man in Hindi, "Excuse me, sir, how far away are we from Amritsar," which is where I was going. And then he turns around and sees me. And, I'm a white girl. And the whole bus just breaks out laughing. And he's like, "How do you speak Hindi? I live here." But, that was just fun. And then also in New Delhi, I was looking for the Red Fort, which is one of the tourist attractions. And so I had enough Hindi at that point to be able to go up to someone, ask them in Hindi, where's the Red Fort, and understand their instructions when they gave them to me. So I go up to a man selling juice on the street, and I, ask him, and he tells me, and I say thank you. And then his companion in a stall next to him says, "No, thank you for speaking Hindi." So, like, that just made my day. I made his day. It was just a lovely interaction of, I can make the effort to be in someone's country and to relate to them on their level. And, he probably could have spoken English to me, but, I'm in his city.
Yeah. So, if you weren't a teacher, do you think you would have pursued chemistry research, translation, or something completely different?
It's hard to say what would have happened in life, but you know what I wanted to be before a teacher? An Air Force pilot.
Oh.
So yeah, bit of a change.
Is there a reason you didn't become an Air Force pilot?
I didn't pass the flight test.
Oh, so you tried to be.
I did, yeah.
What's your favorite scientific discovery or concept in chemistry that still amazes you?
I thought about this, and there's a lot of things on the serious side that I still find mind-blowing, but there's just another fun one, which is outer space tastes like raspberries.
Could you explain it?
So I remember the first time I heard about this. There's a radio program in Canada. I'm not sure if it's still on. It was called Quirks and Quarks.
Mhm,
And I was in the car listening to the radio, and they were talking about now it's a cloud of gas.
mhm,
And when they were doing spectral analysis of this cloud of gas, they found ethyl formate. And ethyl formate is the ester that produces the taste of raspberries.
mhm.
So it's not like, I mean, if you took your space helmet off in space, you wouldn't be able to taste anything, but just the fact that this molecule exists. And so the big headline was space tastes like raspberries, and that's just fun.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Do you see connections between science and languages in how people learn and think?
I'm not sure exactly about how language learning and science learning relate to each other, but I can tell you that communicating is very important to science. So the ability to understand what someone else is saying, the ability to express what you have found, discoveries, cause and effect relationships in science, you need to be able to communicate that. And so language is very important, but I'm not sure of the mechanics in the brain that connect language to
Mhm,
science.
mhm. Before moving to Mexico, have you worked in Canada?
No, actually.
Mhm,
I got out of school at a time when there were too many teachers and not enough jobs. So my first job, like my first full time teaching job, was in Mexico.
So you never worked in Canada?
I've worked short term in Canada.
Mhm,
So you can become, we call them supply teachers, and you get on a list basically. And if someone's on maternity leave, for example, or they need a teacher to fill in for some period of time, you
mhm,
can go take that class for some period of time.
mhm,
So, kind of the longest I ever worked continuously in Canada was 3 months.
mhm. Like, do you have a goal to finish your career, maybe teaching chemistry or French in Canada?
You know, I was in Uzbekistan from 2021 to 2023. I left for 1 year. I was going to do a master's. I thought about maybe going back to Dominican Republic and working with the Ministry of Education directly. I thought about staying in Canada as well. That was the time when I did a 3 month teaching job in Canada, and I turned around and came right back to Uzbekistan.
Mhm,
So you don't get an opportunity like the presidential school in Canada.
mhm,
This type of establishment doesn't exist, and if it does, I imagine the competition would just be incredible
mhm.
to get a job there. So I like where I'm at. I'm probably going to stay for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. So you did your master's in 2023?
So I am actually not finished it yet.
Mhm,
I had to take a medical leave from my master's,
mhm,
so I have 2 more courses to finish. Hopefully, going to do that starting in January of this coming year.
mhm. So it will be online?
Yes, yeah, it's online through the University of Ottawa in Canada.
Mhm, mhm. So I guess it's master's in chemistry
No, actually, it's a master's in education.
in education. What's the most unforgettable experience you have had while traveling or working abroad?
Hmm, interesting. It's there's lots of big things that have happened,
Mhm,
but it's the little things that really, like I said, the bus full of people breaking out laughing because the white girl's speaking Hindi, or people when for when I first came to Uzbekistan and I met my co-teacher in Hiva, and the
mhm,
first day I meet her, like, oh, what do you need? Oh, I'll show you where everything is. I'll take you shopping. Come home to my house for dinner. Stay overnight. Just people who just invite you into their families, like
mhm.
that just leaves a mark.
Yeah. Which country that you've lived in feels most like a home? Of course, besides Canada.
Everywhere has felt like home. Because, like I said, the people everywhere have just been incredibly welcoming. I have never had an issue, and I've always just found that people just bring you into their lives and their families.
Mhm. So as we are talking about like traveling, have you been to the other countries aside from the countries that you mentioned you have worked in as a tourist?
Yes. I think my count is maybe 20 now.
Wow.
But every time I try to count, I forget one.
Uh-huh. That's a huge number. So when you are traveling, like, do you prefer big cities or quiet villages?
I am not much of a big city girl. I do like Tashkent, and then also I am absolutely in love with Mexico City, even though it's this insane big city. but I lived for 3 years in a very small town in, like, not even a town. I lived at the school in India, and I had to walk 5 minutes to even get to a little small village. So I kind of do tend more towards the country life, but there's a couple of cities that I really do like.
Hmm. So you said like the countries that you've been to, people were very welcoming, and were there any cultural shocks that you got?
I don't really get culture shock. Sometimes I shock people. So,
Oh,
so like in India, and not in a bad way, just in a way that they look at me and it's kind of like, wow, that's a different possibility for how life can be.
hmm,
So, like I said, I was in a very, very rural area in India, and you know, just having a foreign person come in and had been a bunch of places, and I drove a motorbike when I was there, so this woman just driving around on her motorbike, going into the big city for the weekend to pick up lab supplies or whatever I was doing. It was just this vision of what life would be without some of the kind of restrictions.
hmm,
So there's plenty of places in India where people live what we would consider totally modern lifestyles, but where I was still kind of very traditional. Women had specific gender roles,
yeah.
and then I came in and just
Hmm.
upended them. So I think I maybe gave more culture shocks than I got.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Um, so have you ever considered working in a university, and why didn't you become maybe a professor or associate professor?
I actually did. So that was the reason I went to get my master's, was I thought that I was going to maybe return to Dominican Republic. There had been some kind of, not firm offers, but discussion about me working either directly with the ministry or at one of the universities. Excuse me. But I saw the universities there, and I was not. You know, it's funny. I do not do well with small children,
Hmm.
but I'm also not a big fan of teaching adults. Teenagers that no one else can stand, those are my people.
Hmm. So you like us?
I like that age group. I like the age group where you're still figuring out who you're going to be. You don't think you know everything.
Hmm.
Adults in university, they think they got it all figured out.
Hmm. Is there anything that you don't like about the education in Canada? If so, what is it?
Cell phones. So there is, when I was there was a suggestion from the government that they were going to get cell phones out of classrooms. And while I was there, that was weighing into my decision of whether I was going to stay in Canada or come back to Uzbekistan. And then we saw that was, the initial announcement by the government, the Minister of Education, was we're going to get the cell phones out of the classrooms. And then he came back with this wording that was so wishy-washy. Teachers are going to have the tools to ask the students, and school by school or board by board decisions are going to be made. And I said, no, you cannot function. Actually, not true. The students that I had in Dominican Republic had smartphones, but the policy of the school was they were used for educational purposes. And if you used it for a purpose other than that, it was taken away. And it was, implemented, enforced, signed on to by the students and their parents. So the policy was clear. So I had no problem teaching in that school in Dominican where cell phones were in use,
Hmm.
smartphones.
Hmm.
And then I have no problem teaching here in Uzbekistan in the presidential school where there are no cell phones. The problem was in Canada, students that I taught had cell phones, and there was no clear policy about they're not allowed to have them, they're not allowed to be on. And so, the kids were very nice. I've never had a problem with the children anywhere. It's
Hmm.
always the adults who fail to establish proper boundaries. So if I told the kids, put your phone away, they would do it. Then 5 minutes later, their hands drifting towards it. They don't even realize they're doing it. They're addicted to the things.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, if I could do anything to help education in Canada, I would get the phones out of the schools. And
Hmm.
there is a push for that, but there's also pushback on it, right?
Hmm.
So it's taking time.
Yeah. Talking about your Indian school, the school that you worked, can you talk a little bit about it?
So yeah, it was a rural area. mostly the children of farmers. And so they were not, um, didn't have a lot of money. It was a kind of a lower socioeconomic group. And they didn't have a lot of supplies. So the reason I went to India, I had seen the job on a board called idealist.org, for people who want to do something good. So I spoke to, there was an Indian man, businessman, who had established the school, and then he had an American woman, a diplomat's wife, who was, she had a big background in education, and she was helping him run the education side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spoke to her and I said, your school sounds amazing. You're trying to, provide a higher level of education than what is publicly available for these poor children in rural India. And I said, your school sounds amazing, but the job isn't very clear. What's the job? And she said, well, what do you do? Well, I get to make my own job title. So I said, I'm a science teacher. My thing is the practical side of science. She says, great. We don't have a science lab. Come make us a science lab. So that's what my job was in India, getting all the supplies and things necessary for them to complete. So they actually have the national curriculum in India is very good on paper, right? But like I said before, it's not about country, it's about socioeconomic status. So you have higher socioeconomic status in India, you get world-class education, but these kids didn't have access to the same education. So we got all of the lab supplies and chemicals and equipment that were necessary for them to complete all of they have mandatory labs that they have to do and a lab book that they have to hand in as proof that they've done these labs. And before they were just, the teacher would tell them what to write in the lab book and they were writing in the lab book. And then we actually got the materials to actually do the labs.
How would you compare the infrastructure of the schools that you've worked so far? And which one is like the best in your opinion?
In terms of infrastructure, this one's the best. It's the most kind of the technology is good. The access to, like I said, the chemicals and equipment. Some of the equipment I didn't see till I was in university. And then probably the worst would have been the school in India where my windows didn't even have glass on them. They had bars on them, but the bars were not close enough together to keep out the baby monkey who stole some sugar out of my lab.
Whoa, yeah. Really?
Yes.
What about the students? Like, I think, and as most of us know, students from India tend to be very smart. Have you noticed any differences between students from the countries that you've worked?
Again, first of all, I've never met a student who wasn't smart. I've met students who, don't fit into the mold of classical education and kind of come up against their teachers and don't want to behave in ways that we think are appropriate. And I've met kids who have absolutely no background because they came up in either very poor schools or, sometimes some of the schools around the area I taught at in India, you can't even get down the road during some of the rainy season. So, they miss a lot of days of school in the year. And so I've definitely met students with lower baseline of knowledge, but, intelligence, you meet really smart people everywhere. And I think more than between countries, again, I'm going to repeat that the differences you find are between socioeconomic status. And like I said, not at all in intelligence, but in preparedness, because, they had the kids who had more money, they come from households maybe that they have books in their home. Their parents read to them. Their parents are more educated. Maybe they went to kindergarten, they went to private schools. They had all the access, right? I think that's the biggest thing that has defined the level of people's education is not across countries, it's across socioeconomic status.
Which part of the India did you work in, and how is that area is similar or different compared to where you're living now, Andijan?
Well, it couldn't get much more different. I mean, I lived at the school as well in India, but surrounding the school, you just had like rice field, train tracks. There was nothing. We were in the middle of nowhere. There were some students who lived at the hostel during the week because they were too far away, but a lot of kids came on their bicycles from the surrounding area or walked.
Mhm.
Sometimes 10 or 15 kilometers they'd come on a bicycle to come to our school. And so it was just out in nature, in the fields, and then here, the most densely populated city in
Yeah,
Uzbekistan, it doesn't get
yeah.
much more different than that.
Uh-huh. So you are originally from Canada, and like the weather is not hot. I would say even cold in Canada, and you worked in the Morocco. Like, did you consider the weather as well when you were choosing to work in the Morocco, and how did you cope with the high temperatures?
Well, actually, I worked in Casablanca, which is right on the it's right on the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very temperate. It was nice.
Mm-hmm.
If you get further away from the ocean, or part of Morocco's on the Atlantic and part of it's on the Mediterranean. If you get further away from the water, then you get into the desert, and it can get really hot and really oppressive. But where I worked, the temperature was really nice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think about climate when I go somewhere, which is why someone like me who hates the heat could spend 5 years in Dominican Republic, where you only stop sweating for about 3 weeks in January, and then the rest of it's hot.
Mm. So you work under AC and maybe some other things.
I mean, India was particularly tough because we didn't have AC half the time. We didn't even have electricity.
Oh.
So, when the fans came on, it was a joy. But same, the classrooms in Dominican, we didn't have air conditioning either. We had big ceiling fans, so I mostly didn't find it too uncomfortable. But there are times when it is.
Mm-hmm. So you are an adaptable person. Why did you choose the Mexico as your first country to work in? Was it because like it was more in proximity to Canada?
No, it was a total accident. So I was looking for jobs. The job board at my university, my teacher's college university, they had an international section. At that point, there was only one job advertisement. It was for Mexico. I applied for it, and the rest is history. It
Mm-hmm.
was not intentional.
Uh, what's the most popular thing in Mexico? Like the dances, festivals, or maybe even the food?
Um, so Mexicans have an incredible love for all of those things. They are very family oriented, and they will automatically adopt you into their family as well. So, yeah, all holidays are, there's always just an immense amount of food. Mexican food is incredible, so tasty, except now I'm a wimp. I used to be able to eat it, it's very spicy. Now, if you try to put authentic Mexican food in front of me, I can't quite handle it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, they love dancing. Salsa in particular and cumbia are kind of their um, styles of dance. And especially traditional families, like my best friend's family, everyone dances. So, they taught me how to dance, but it was like, grandpa teaching me how to dance. Yeah, definitely. And their festivals are so vibrant.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen the movie Coco.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, so like the Day of the Dead and all
Yeah.
the altars and everything painted, and they also the alebrijes, the monsters that are their like protectors in Coco.
Mhm.
They make big paper mache models of these monsters and parade them down one of the biggest streets in Mexico City every year, and it's just incredible art and music, and just everything is color,
Yeah.
similar to India actually.
Yes. Like I think it was last year or before the last year, we had an assignment from our global perspectives class, and we had to present like the festivals of the country, and we chose Mexico, and we did like the Day of the Dead, and I was very like inspired by it because everybody participates in it, and like they have the skulls thrown to their face, and I have also seen it in some movies also, and I think like the festivals are the main things in the Mexico.
Yes, but the Day of the Dead, I mean, there is a lot of pageantry that goes with it too, but also there's a particular place, um, if I remember correctly, it's called Morelia,
Mm.
that has like a more traditional take on it. So the purpose behind Day of the Dead is to invite the spirits of your ancestors to come back and visit you. And in Morelia, they have like a more traditional. So they decorate only with natural things. They go to the actual cemetery. They bring all of the foods, especially foods that their loved ones
Mhm.
used to eat. they all go like generations, great grandparents, grandparents, parents, children will all be at the graveyard together. Everything is handmade in this particular place. It's all decorated with flowers and hand embroidered altar cloths and just natural wax candles and everything. So I actually went there one of the years that I was in Mexico, and it was amazing.
Uh-huh. So again, to the school that you worked in the Mexico, like was it private or public, and how good it was in giving education?
Okay, I actually worked at 3 different schools in Mexico. The first one was they were all private schools, but the first one was kind of for more, middle class or upper middle class, not people with a lot of wealth. Anytime people get money in Mexico, they tend to send their kids to private school. So it's not just the super wealthy. There's just different levels of private schools that have, different tuition points. So the first school that I worked at, I quite liked it. I thought the education was a good level. The students were, what I would have thought public school students were like in Canada. It seemed kind of the same level as that. The second school that I worked at definitely tried to make itself look more prestigious, and in terms of the actual quality of materials and infrastructure, it was better. But and those kids were really great too. A lot of them were the sons and daughters of diplomats or international business people. So, and there was a bunch of different, not only Mexican students, a bunch of different cultures also. So that um, that atmosphere was like the kids were really interested. They had a broader mindset, a worldview. And then the third place that I worked at was kind of the most expensive of the 3, and those students had gone totally the other way, where they were so rich that they had like bodyguards and stuff because their parents were afraid they were going to get kidnapped. So they had very closed-in mind view, and that was difficult. That was also, I saw the same thing in Morocco that I saw in that school in Mexico, which is trying to deal with children who have very rarely ever been told no in their life. So, not good discipline. And again, it's not the children, because children are just, raw material, and then the adults need to put boundaries and structure in order to kind of guide them in the right direction. And they were not getting enough boundaries, and they were just trying to walk all over us as teachers. So I wasn't a big fan of that school.
So was that the reason you left Mexico, like kids being arrogant and not like trying to learn?
That was, not the reason I left Mexico so much as the reason I looked for a new school. So I actually looked for and was kind of offered an NGO job in Mexico, but then kind of the funding never got off the ground to do that. So it wasn't so much that I wanted to leave Mexico. I wanted to get out of the private school business. So then, India came up. But I had looked in Mexico. I love Mexico for the culture. I was very happy living in Mexico City. But, I didn't have the job that I wanted. So then I, crossed half the world chasing the job.
And now let's talk about Uzbekistan a little bit. How did you discover the chance of job offer in Uzbekistan?
So that was when I was in Morocco at another very wealthy school, and once again trying to get anywhere but a private school. So I can't remember which was it's just a job board for international teachers. Can't remember which one it was that had a posting for this school, and I saw that it was similar to what I had done in Dominican, where students have to compete to get into the school. They really want to be there. They're really interested in learning things. And then when I did the interview and they talked about the type of equipment that was available, the class sizes, the type of individualized attention that you'll be able to give the students, then I thought, yeah, this is, even though I had heard of Uzbekistan before, but it was never on my list of places. I don't have a list of places to go. People said, "Oh wow, you've been to India. That's on my bucket list or whatever." I don't have a list. I find everywhere fascinating.
Have you tried Uzbek cuisine, and do you like it so far?
Yes, I love it. Especially my favorite is plov, but specifically the plov that my best friend Miasa and Hiba makes in her home. It's my favorite. She tried to teach me how to make it, but I am absolute disaster in the kitchen. So I'll just kind of stand there and very slowly help her chop carrots.
So you said like the food was spicy in Mexico, and as far as I know, the Indians also love spicy food. But here in Uzbekistan, there are people who like spicy food, but most of our food has a lot of meat. Do you like meat, or are you a vegetarian?
I'm definitely not a vegetarian. When I lived in India, I ate mostly vegetarian food though. So anytime I don't have to cook it, I'm happy to eat it. There are very few kinds of food that I don't like. I will say I don't like sushi. And before you tell me it's just because I haven't had good sushi, I've been to Japan. I just don't like it. Raw fish, no thank you. But other than that, I pretty much love all food. But yeah, Mexico and India, you kind of got to train yourself to be able to take that much spice. When I lived there, I could eat it. And actually, I went from Mexico to India. So when they first gave me Indian food and they offered me some green chilies to put in my food, and I did and started eating it, they're looking at me like, oh yeah, she's all right.
How long do you want to work and live in Uzbekistan?
I am not much of a planner. So for the foreseeable future, things are going well. I'm happy. I'll stay on as long as that continues to be the case.
Now let's talk about like your hobbies and your philosophy towards life. How do you spend your free time? Like, what are your hobbies?
What free time? I'm a teacher. No, I'm kidding. I like to play the guitar. I like to exercise. So, I need to find a good place to kind of go out walking. The city here, it's very city. I need to find some kind of greener space. But yeah, that's pretty much how I spend my time. I love to read.
How many hours of sleep do you usually get? Because you look always fresh and more energetic than us.
I'm very serious about my sleeping. So yeah, usually I'd say 7 to 8. Um, I there's not much that keeps me up at night. I value a good night's sleep over just about anything else.
How is your life so far in Uzbekistan? Like, do you go to shopping and how many cities have you been so far?
So I have done kind of the tourist route of Uzbekistan. I mean, I lived in Hiva for 2 years, so obviously spent time there. But then while I was living there, I visited Samarkand, Bukhara, Nukuz, just Tashkent, obviously. So yeah, I've seen a lot of kind of what the tourists would see.
Do you like the architecture of Samarkand and Bukhara?
Yeah. So in terms of just the insane beauty of it, I don't think anything compares to Samarkand. But I also love Bukhara's like the old market feel of it, where you go down all these alleys in this covered market, and you can kind of go looking for antiques and stuff. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. About the shopping, like, do you go to supermarkets or you do the bargaining in bazaars?
I am the worst at bargaining. I don't do it. So yeah, I usually go to the supermarket. I'll go to the bazaar if there's something in particular that I'm after. And it's always fun when I try to go to the bazaar. I was looking for thread to mend a dress of mine, and I'm, roaming around trying to ask people, get out the translator on my phone, trying to ask people where do I go to find a sewing shop and that kind of thing. So that part's fun, but I don't haggle. You tell me the price, I just pay it.
What's the one thing apart from people that you like the most in Uzbekistan?
Um, that's hard to say because it kind of also relates to the people. I love the music and dancing, and I love how you can't go to dinner without it turning into a dance party. So, I mean, that's also because of the people, right?
Yeah. And now let's proceed to some questions that we ask every single guest. And the first one would be, who is your idol in your life?
I mean, it's got to be Marie Curie, right? for a female chemistry teacher. I mean, her obviously, and then just kind of anyone who was in a space where they were told they don't belong and they persevered anyway and just paved the way for the rest of us.
I'm sure that there are some of our listeners who want to work internationally. What advice would you give them?
If you get the opportunity to do it, there's nothing like the perspective that it gives you stepping outside of your own culture and, really getting to relate to someone else's. So, tourism is lovely and beautiful, but when you go live a place and work there and interact with people on a very kind of day-to-day level, then you really get the feeling of what that society is about. So, if you have the opportunity, absolutely do it. And, it's a little bit unfair. It's more than a little bit unfair, but, learn English because it opens so many doors, right? Any language does. But fortunately for me, because I was born lucky, to be born
Yeah.
into an English speaking family, it's, all around the world. So it will definitely open some doors.
Mhm. Looking back, what's the one decision in your life that you think changed your past the most?
So when I was thinking about whether or not I should apply to that first job in Mexico, I was living in a city in Canada at the time. I had a roommate, and I don't know if I should apply for this job. And she goes, "Just apply. You don't have to go if you change your mind. Just apply. Come on." And I did, and everything else has come from there. There was never a plan to work overseas, to travel as much as I have. You know, it just kind of happened, and every opportunity I've had since then has been from that one roommate, Hannah, who told me, "Just apply. Come on. What do you have to lose?"
Do you still have connections with her?
I have her on Facebook. We don't talk very much anymore, though.
Mhm, mhm. You have earned the Dostlik Ordeni medal, which is very prestigious award in Uzbekistan. And how did you feel when you knew that you were getting it?
Absolutely overwhelmed. I mean, honored, obviously, but where I come from, regular people don't meet the president, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we don't have a president, we have a
Yeah.
prime minister, but regular people don't meet the prime minister. Maybe a teacher who's dedicated, 50 years of their lives to teaching or something, maybe would meet the prime minister. So, I mean, it was just astounding. I couldn't believe that it was going to happen, and obviously a great honor.
Yeah.
And I hope to live up to it.
Yeah, the teachers here in Uzbekistan are very valued. What did Mr. President say to you when you met him?
He congratulated me, which was lovely, and then he knew that I worked at the Presidential School of Andijan, and he mentioned how important Andijan is for him. He was a couple of times it came up actually when he was speaking to me, and then during the rest of the event, he talked a couple of times about Andijan being 10% of the Uzbek population in 1% of the space. So I mean, this is a center where there are so many people, and there can be so much innovation and so much progress, right?
Yeah. And the last question, what are the best three books that you recommend to others?
Asking me to pick three books is very difficult, but I do have some recommendations. I think I might go past your three, though.
Okay.
In terms of novels and just for enjoyment, I love The Book Thief.
Mhm,
And then books that I loved when I was younger, kind of books for your formative years, To Kill a Mockingbird.
mhm,
And I also love just kind of science books. So there's one called Immune. That is, I love the way the author describes the immune system because there's enough science to make it interesting for someone who's a bit of a scientist, and there's also enough kind of interesting visualization to make it good for people who aren't scientists. Like he describes part of the immune system, neutrophils, as being like chimps with machine guns.
mhm,
Like they go in there to destroy the bacteria, but they destroy everything else in their path too.
mhm,
And then anything by Malcolm Gladwell.
mhm, mhm.
That's all I can recommend.
Yeah. So thank you for your participation. That brings us to the end of today's episode of AIM Talks. Ms Abbey, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. It's been truly inspiring, and there were a lot of insights. And to our listeners, we hope that you enjoyed it and learned something new. Please, if you liked it, share, comment, and like this video. See you next time.